Hey everybody, this is Corey with Stafford ZDC, and today we're taking a look at the Sasori from CMB Knives. This here is a Tiguas design. I think that's how you say it. It's Tiguass. I'll bring in the card here that comes with the knife so you can see that spelled out. This is the DOA, I guess, not COA. It's not a certificate, it's a declaration of authenticity. You can see it's M390. It has a belt satin, handles made of titanium, and they're running this in a pretty large Rockwell range of 58 to 62 HRC. And you can see the logos down there for CMB Knives and Tiguas. I have no idea, but you can see the logos there. I'm probably embarrassing myself with the pronunciation, but nevertheless, let's talk a little bit about this knife. These are currently available, as I am looking on White Mountain Knives, for $221. And for $221, you're getting an overall length of 7.28 inches with a 3.14 inch blade, flipper deployment, blade stock thickness of 3.2 millimeters, which is at its thickest point. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what millimeters 2 inches is, but I don't remember, so we're going to measure it. 0.12, pretty typical, probably what I should have expected. But this has a nice swedge along the backside, so you're rarely, besides this flat portion here, dealing with the full thickness of the blade, which is a great thing. Something that if you were familiar with my videos and my taste in knives, you'll know that I don't like knives where you have to deal with the full thickness, especially if it is 0.12 or greater. So that is great to see. Your handle length is 4.13 inches. Already know it's belt satin in M390. And the total weight is nice and light, 2.57 ounces on this. It's running on bearings, and it's a frame lock. You do have a insert there as well, and it does act as an over travel stop in there as well. So overall, it's a pretty simple knife coming from CMB. You know, at the bare roots of it, it's a titanium flipper in M390. And it's a frame lock. Have you heard that one before? Does that sound familiar? It's a very commonly done concept, which is no joke, and no surprise. Obviously, there's a reason why these kinds of knives are so popular, and this reminds me a lot, design-wise, of the ZT 0450. I believe is the model number. It's a Sinkovich design, and it came all black with carbon fiber scales, or there was a titanium version as well. And this kind of has that similar DNA. I actually thought this reminded me a lot of a Sinkovich design, though the angles are a little bit different. Sinkovich tends to be very curved, and this has some sharper turns in it, like with this small recurved area with a hollow grind into this large tanto point with the flat grind, which is a cool feature about this knife, being the fact that you do have this compound grind on it, which leads into the performance. Cutting with this lower portion of the blade, this lower like 1.25 inches of the 3.1 inch blade, you're looking at really nice slicing abilities. This hollow grind, though it's short, gets pretty thin, which is the advantage of a hollow grind, of course. It gets to a nice thin edge, so you are able to slice into things really nicely until you hit this full thickness, which in that case you have just a little bit extra drag, which is quickly alleviated by this swedge on the back. So that makes this lower area really nice for cutting. If you have to push through a tougher material, this is the area on the blade to do it, as long as it's not something that's really hard. In that case, if it's something harder, you might want to use the flat ground portion of the blade, going from here to the tip, where you have quite a bit more metal supporting that edge. And although it might not be as easy to pass through the material, you don't have to worry about deflecting in any kind of way, which can happen with thin hollow grind, especially if this is at like 58 HRC. I'm not like a steel nerd or an expert by any means, but a softer heat-treated M390 is in my head makes sense that it's going to be more likely to fold and kind of deform than chip. I know harder M390 is more likely to chip, so that makes sense to me. I could be off on what I'm saying there, but if you do need to cut through anything more substantial, I would use the flat grind. Hollow grinds are not meant for that. They are meant for slicing because they get so thin, and they are so thin behind the edge that it's important that you don't bash these into really thick and tough materials, whereas the flat grind up here can definitely handle it. I wear a large size glove, and this knife is just enough handle for me. You can see how my pinky just kind of half rests on that little bit that's left, and then I can kind of squeeze my fingers up more and get a little more grip there. Thumb anywhere on the back here is fairly comfortable. You have pretty much 90 degrees here, but it's a chamfer, so it's not quite 90 obviously, but it's not uncomfortable to put your thumb on the spine of this. It's not sharp. You're not like gonna cut yourself on these edges or anything. I think there's just a very slight knockdown going on. You can kind of see how that color changes, where that those grind lines kind of disappear right before the flat, right in this area. So they have knocked down that edge a little bit, so it is comfortable to put your thumb on top of that. This flipper locks you in really nicely, and the pocket clip is really unobtrusive. It's nice in hand. You can see it's a pretty basic milled clip that is flat. It's contoured on the end here to help with no hot spotting on the pinky or in the palm, which is really nice to see. Oftentimes on pocket clips you see kind of a sharp corner there, and it ends up digging into the palm a little bit, but this guy is just fine with that slight chamfer on the end, just right there. It makes it nice and comfortable, makes it a pretty good and comfortable knife to use when slicing. And again, if you're using this lower portion of the blade, you're going to get really good performance, and it's not uncomfortable to use. It's fairly thin overall. Being that the handle doesn't have that much width in this dimension, it's definitely more of a knife that you want to hold out in your fingers rather than deeper in your hand. If you had to, you could. It's definitely not uncomfortable, but it feels a little more natural to have this out in the hand, kind of in a saber grip, rather than deep in a hammer grip for more powerful cuts. Something that this doesn't feel like it's made for. Being nice and lightweight too, only 2 ounces and change, is really nice. This one just disappears in the pocket because of that. And then finally the action. Detent is really good on this, and the bearings work just fine. This has no blade play. It's not over tightened or anything as far as I can tell. You just have a quite light blade, which leads to a little bit of shaking to get it shut. You can see when the lock's depressed though, it'll drop to your fingernail, and then just has to be shut the rest of the way, which is a nice thing to see. One of the other things that this kind of reminded me of, as I'm looking at it again, is Shirogorov. This has a very similar handle design to a Shiro, with the flipper and the kind of general shape, and maybe it's this chamfer right here that makes me think of it, but it kind of reminds me of that. Might not remind everybody, but overall I get kind of that vibe from it. Let me know what you think about this one down below. The Sasori was definitely a knife that performed well and does everything it needs to do. And I'm curious what you guys think about this one down below. Do you own one? Do you own knives from CMB? I know they're kind of new to the scene. They've been around for like a couple years now and are still putting out new designs. So let me know what you guys think about them down below. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and take care.